wait a few minutes for the audience to be able to file into the virtual auditorium. That always takes the software 5 seconds or so, 10 seconds. And then once the numbers stop increasing, I'll know that we'll be able to begin the actual program. It's still going up. Well, that looks like pretty much it. Welcome everybody to the Women Institute's third web talk for November of 2017. This is, I think, our record. We've never done 3 in 1 month, but subsequently we're pretty much going to be doing 2 per month for the next 6 months or so anyway. And today, Robert Atkinson will be giving his third presentation, Reality is One, and Global Harmony is Inevitable, Building a Culture of Oneness. I should begin with a quick introduction to the Wilmette Institute for those who are only slightly familiar with it, but I'll cut back on this. We're now approaching our 23rd birthday. We used to run a face-to-face program, but very early on we switched to online courses. And from 1998 to the present, we've now got 20 years of experience. In January of 1998, it'll be the 20th anniversary of the online courses. We've now had 440 courses and over 11,700 learners taking those courses from 123 countries. And those learners have really been doing some remarkable things with the knowledge that they've acquired. Classes, PowerPoints, scholarly presentations, talks on the radio, all kinds of different things that people have done. And we've even had at least one marriage as a result of people meeting in our courses. Robert Atkinson, who is our speaker today, is a well-known and acknowledged authority on life, story, interviewing, personal myth-making, and soul-making. He's published 9 books, and this particular series comes from his book, The Story of Our Times, From Duality to Interconnected to Oneness. So that's really where the material for this series is coming from. He has a BA in Philosophy and American Studies, 2 MAs, one in American folk culture and one in counseling, and a PhD in cross-cultural human development from the University of Pennsylvania. And subsequently, he was a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Chicago as well. So we will turn this over to Robert for his presentation today. Take it over, Robert.
Thanks, Rob. Is that up?
Not yet. There we go.
Let me get the, okay. Is that up now, the slide?
Yep.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Rob. It's great to be back with you for this third talk in the series. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I look forward to your thoughts, comments, and questions at the end. Just for a quick review, the first talk was on the nature of consciousness, or how and why its potentiality is ever evolving. And the second talk was on the nature of transformation, or what its role and purpose is in the evolution of civilization. Today, we're going to conclude with a look at the nature of reality and how our evolving understanding of its wholeness is leading us all to the realization of humanity's timeless vision of peace on Earth. So each of these talks have been adapted from my book, The Story of Our Time, which provides a missing link to understanding how and why all the world's spiritual and religious traditions are but one evolving knowledge system. So to start off with a quote that kind of puts the topic in perspective, this is from Abdu'l-Baha: "Reality is one, and when found, it will unify all mankind. Reality is the knowledge of God. Reality underlies all the great religious systems of the world." So one of the things that's really interesting, I think is really interesting about this quote, is that not only is reality one as a spiritual fact or reality itself, but that when humanity comes to realize that, that's one of the things that will contribute significantly to unifying all mankind. So here's a quick overview for today's topics that we're going to be covering. A quick look at the nature of reality will be first, and then we'll consider some of the spiritual forces guiding us toward unity. And then we'll look at how we can revision religion as a sacred tree. And then we'll talk about the global movement of our time and the action most needed now to move that movement along. And we're going to close with a meditation on living in oneness to try to bring all three talks really into perspective and make it more practical. And then we'll have time for some reflection and dialogue. So this is from Principle 5 in the book, which is about the nature of reality. Reality is one and global harmony is inevitable, which is where the title for today's talk comes from. Reality is a changeless, grand, organic whole. Everything in it is connected to and part of every other thing. Our conscious evolution has taken us through stages from family to tribe to city-state to national unity. We are now on the verge of realizing world unity as one human family. With all the world's spiritual and religious traditions looking forward to some form of a new heaven and earth, there has always been the hope and desire for peace on earth. The mystery of oneness is at the heart of creation. Material and spiritual reality, counterbalancing parts of the same unified reality, are energized and held together by the same force that organizes and sustains the entire universe. This connective, creative energy, known as love, the divine spirit, or grace, is the underlying force expressed in every dimension of reality. So reality is the absolute unity of all existence, the whole within which the great diversity of all its parts find their place. The existence of one reality has forever directed our collective evolution toward the realization of this oneness. Unity is the underlying principle defining reality, and it's also its primary characteristic. So how we see reality depends upon our own perspective. Seeing through our eyes, we tend to see distinctions, separations, and imperfections first. But shifting our perspective, looking through the eyes of the Creator, we see the whole first, as it really is. This spiritual reality of holiness and oneness is always right before our eyes, too. Here are a couple of quotes that capture this, this perspective of oneness. The Buddha said, "All things originate from one essence, develop according to one law, and are destined to one aim." And then closer to modern times, Albert Einstein said, "One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality." So again, reality is the whole unified field comprising the entirety of creation. All of its parts fit together in a mysterious harmony, a hidden wholeness. But we discover the reality of reality gradually. Though we come from oneness, are born into a realm of dualities, and strive to reclaim a consciousness of oneness, awareness is all that changes in the journey from separation to one reality, as Deepak Chopra has said. So how we perceive reality is dependent upon where we are on our own consciousness continuum. Reality does not change, we do. And as we change, we see the same reality differently. At one point along the continuum, the sun rises and sets. At another point, we come to understand it is the earth turning in its journey around the sun. So an evolving consciousness fulfills the potential we are born with, moving across the consciousness continuum from separation to unity allows us to see wholeness, to get the true picture of reality as it is. This also allows us to see divine or revealed truth, as well as scientific or discovered truth as relative, progressive, and unfolding gradually, but continuously across time. So here we have reality as a continuum. I'm not sure if you can see this chart that well on your screen, but it's designed to show where our consciousness will lead us depending on our perspective of things. And so we can start with, on the top part of the chart, we could start with either with a pragmatic centered perspective, which implies seeing things as dualities or as separate. And if we start there, that perspective of separateness and duality is going to lead to certain predictable kinds of results in terms of our consciousness. So it leads to a recognition of difference in groups and out groups, superior and inferior groups, dominant and subordinate groups. It leads to categorization, gender inequality, ethnocentrism, all those kinds of generalizations that also lead to stereotypes and other ways of living with the separateness, like segregation, even hatred, and on. You can see how where this is going. It also leads to economic extremes, secular nationalism, and discrimination at all levels and degrees, exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness on a more collective level, cultural imperialism, fundamentalist movements. And on the top part, this is moving from bias to prejudice to oppression to racism, which includes violence, destruction, genocide, and ending with war of all kinds. That's how we move along the consciousness continuum if we begin with a perspective of duality. However, if we start with a principle-centered perspective where all things are recognized as a wholeness, that's going to lead in the opposite direction toward integrity, the value of multiculturalism, inclusivity, altruism, compassion, interfaith collaboration, all those kinds of things that involve respect and appreciation of the other, including harmony, love, nonviolence, unity and diversity, gender equality, economic equity, universal human rights, leading to cooperation and ultimately unity and finally peace. So this is a quick overview of kind of the way one way we can see the consciousness continuum and how we move along it. So we're obviously not left on our own. There are spiritual forces guiding us toward unity. all the world's religious traditions have the goal of transcending duality and achieving oneness. And this is seen in any number of spiritual practices around the world, from the Hindu practice of yoga, which really has its goal of union, the Buddhist notion of sadhana, which is to realize the paradox expressed in the union of opposites, or the state of non-duality, and the Taoist notion of the way is a method used to unite what is divided. The Judeo-Christian notion of regaining paradise is built upon the human condition resulting from the fall or paradise lost, with the goal of regaining that in the context of peace on earth. And there's also the Islamic concept of Tawheed, or divine unity. Another interesting aspect of this of forces guiding us toward unity would be from Baha'u'llah's Seven Valleys, which traces the journey of the soul through the planes of limitation in the world of opposites in the first three valleys, but then goes on to the next valley of unity, which is really a bridge between the temporal and the eternal realm, where the veils of plurality are pierced and the heaven of singleness is entered and lights of oneness are manifest. So in the valley of unity, we begin to understand the meaning of the hadith of Muhammad. Knowledge is a single point, but the ignorant have multiplied it. And of course, the last three valleys are also designed to not only keep us in that perspective of oneness, but also move us further along and deepen us in that sense of oneness. So because these spiritual forces throughout history and today as well have been and are guiding us toward unity, we have this quote from Baha'u'llah: "The whole earth is now in a state of pregnancy. The day is approaching when it will have yielded its noblest fruits, the most enchanting blossoms, the most heavenly blessings." So all these spiritual forces are guiding us toward oneness, and they are coming into sharper focus. With unconditional love as the foundation for a universal code of ethics, a golden age of humanity is being ushered in. And the interesting thing is that there are a lot of others beyond the spiritual or religious world who are also recognizing this. Today, many scientists and philosophers are aligned with the world's wisdom traditions in recognizing this interconnectedness, a central theme going back to indigenous beliefs. The perennial philosophy, or the great chain of being, which has spread across humanity's entire history, and scientific and spiritual ways of thinking all describe ultimate reality, or the creator, as one, a unified field, holistic, progressive, and with a purpose toward which we are moving. So a global transformation of consciousness is underway. The most formidable force of change now spreading throughout the world is global integration. We are currently transitioning into our long-awaited stage of maturity. It is now within the reach of every human being alive today to cultivate a global consciousness. And we're going to trace this a little bit in a real kind of outline way, but we can go back to the mid-1800s and or a century and a half or so ago, the New England Transcendentalists knew from the ancient Upanishads that, as Emerson put it, there is one mind common to all individual men. Emerson's Oversoul described that unity within which every particular man's being is contained and made one with all other. And this has evolved and spread in many ways throughout the world. So here we come to the long promised peace on earth. It's been a process long underway, and as we know from the Baha'i writings, even beyond political peace, world unity is the goal. And unity is the force that is most characteristic of the creative power of the Creator, the primary influence driving the progress of civilization. Just a little bit more about unity, I think, would be helpful. First of all, its opposite, disunity, is what cripples society's progress and is a fundamental cause of the world's ills. In the midst of our collective illness, it may appear that the collective will or urge to change anything. It is the very nature of her. And it's important, or same is harmony. Unity can coexist with difference. Diversity is a fact of life and always will be. The goal is unity in diversity, or unity with the diversity that exists everywhere. The principle of unity and diversity seeks to broaden the base of society and remold its underlying values and its institutions to keep up with the needs of an ever-changing world. So, peace is seen not only as a promise waiting to be fulfilled in the Baha'i writings, but also as inevitable for many reasons. And it might be helpful just to mention a couple of those reasons. Throughout history, the great religions have been the primary agents of the spiritual development of humanity, both individually and collectively. No other force has led people to greater heights of discipline, devotion, and altruistic sacrifice. The human spirit has long been endowed with the capacity to build a balanced material and spiritual civilization. Now, with a new set of spiritual principles revealed for our time, foremost of which is the unity of the human race, supported further by other social justice principles, we have even greater spiritual capacity. But before peace can be realized, the prerequisite is fully adopting, implementing, and putting into practice these spiritual principles that will bring about world unity, which is itself the final prerequisite to world peace. So this does not mean that we because it's seen as a promise waiting to be fulfilled and even as inevitable, this does not mean that we all sit back and watch. Rather, this view renews hope, affirms the eventual outcome, and acknowledges a purpose to these turbulent and chaotic times. And most important, it raises a call to action, because the way we get to this desired outcome is dependent upon us. With this vision of the future, and knowing that the human race will not be obliterated, we must take on our responsibility as proactive midwives to shorten this painful transition period and bring about, as gentle as possible, a rebirth of the planet. Most vital is assisting this process with our own sacred activism every day of our lives, applying the wisdom, practices, and tools already available to us. So that means that the ultimate outcome is inevitable, but how and when we get there is not predetermined. That's why Baha'u'llah calls upon humanity to be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. So moving to the next topic, this global transformation of consciousness we are undergoing includes a total revisioning of how we understand religion. And here is principle 6 from the book. Revelation is continuous and progressive. There has never been a time when humanity has been without a connection to and guidance from the Creator. The release of spiritual energies, essential in the past and future alike, is always needed to transform human hearts, shape new social institutions, and expand circles of unity. And we have this quote from Abdu'l-Baha that supports this. The organization of God is one. The evolution of existence is one. The divine system is one. All are subject to one law and system. So there are two ways we can view religion. We can view it as multiple, separate, and independent entities, or we can view religion as one evolving knowledge system with many branches. And if we see reality as a whole, we also have to see divine truth as relative, progressive, and unfolding gradually, all the while coming from the same source. Revisioning religion as a living, eternal tree means that the oneness of divinity becomes more understandable as the process of ongoing revelation is visualized as an unfolding, ever-growing tree of many branches, with the indigenous traditions of branches, the Abrahamic branches, and the Dharmic branches. And let me just say a little bit about those main branches. The indigenous branches consist of all the ancient and modern native spiritual traditions throughout the world. They understand this tree as sacred, put here by the creator of all things, the great mystery. It symbolizes unity, connectedness, and eternity, and is believed to be the tree that will gradually gather all the people of the earth under it, as in the Lakota tradition of the story of the sacred tree. The Abrahamic branches are made up of the line of prophets or founders of religions whose direct lineage is traced back to Abraham. This line includes Moses through Isaac, Jesus through Isaac, Muhammad through Ishmael, and Baha'u'llah through Sarah and Keturah. Each of the religions of these prophets share the common belief that the Creator guides humanity through revealed teachings to the prophets up to and including those in their own scripture. The Dharmic branches consist of the religions of the prophets Krishna, Buddha, and Zoroaster, as well as others originating on the Indian subcontinent, including Jainism and Sikhism. These traditions share certain key concepts, such as various forms or interpretations of karma, dharma, samsara, moksha, and yoga. Visualizing religion as a single tree, divinity is recognized as the single source of religion. The ancient and ongoing knowledge system of religion itself becomes characterized as an organic process of growth. Having grown for thousands of years, this tree, as with all of nature, has its own seasons of decay and renewal, with new shoots, branches, and leaves, while all its growth is always still part of the same tree. And more and more recently and commonly, many scientists, philosophers, and social scientists also visualize religion as a tree of many branches, periodically renewed by one source. So if we, just a second. If we revision religion as built upon a dynamic, interconnected sequence of divine messengers, the founders of the world's major religions, we can see that each represents a stage in the unfolding of a single reality. As Abdu'l-Baha says here, religion is the outer expression of divine reality. Therefore, it must be living, vitalized, moving, and progressive. And so all of this means that we are in a spiritual springtime now, and the eternal sacred tree of religion is blossoming again with a new chapter in humanity's story. Though there are still signs of adolescent turmoil all around us, unseen but ever-present spiritual forces are being released in our time. A global ethic with universal values is emerging, and humanity's coming of age is upon us. Leading thinkers today recognize the core principle of our time, the oneness of humanity, and what it entails. Irving Laszlo, who is the leading systems theorist, has said that mankind needs a star to follow, or standards by which we can direct our steps. And he adds that these will come from the great ideals of the world's religions. Irving Laszlo goes on to say, just a second. He goes on to say, the essential goal of the Baha'i faith is to achieve a vision that is world-embracing and could lead to the unity of mankind. Laszlo is relatively alone among his peers in recognizing the role of Baha'u'llah as a necessary link in the great chain of being for proclaiming an emerging concept of historical progress that is both linear and cyclical at the same time. And this is the way he explains it. He says, starts out with the idea that the average person has a linear concept of progress, with conditions improving year after year. Juxtaposed to this, though, with recent setbacks, including the atomic bomb, nuclear disasters, oil spills, economic downturns, is the opposite image of linear regress. The limits to growth pessimism, culminating in a global catastrophe. But Laszlo says there is now emerging a concept of historical progress that is less naive and more realistic than the linear progress or regress concept dominant in public consciousness. And this is a long quote from Irving Laszlo to explain that. He says, although the scientific concept has been discovered only recently, remarkably enough, its main outlines have been anticipated in the 19th century by a Persian prophet whose influence is only now beginning to be felt in the modern world. Over 100 years ago, Baha'u'llah, founder of the Baha'i faith, proclaimed that the oneness of mankind will be achieved in evolutionary stages, replete with strife, chaos, and confusion. Historical development begins with the birth of the family, the advent of tribal society, and continues in turn with the constitution of the city-state and other political units. In recent times, these units have expanded into independent sovereign nations. The next stage in its social evolution, Baha'u'llah taught, is the organization of human society as a planetary civilization, which will be characterized by the emergence of a world community, the consciousness of world citizenship, and the founding of a world civilization and culture which would allow for an infinite diversity in the characteristics of its components. The world state, the consummation of human evolution, will come about through periods of upheaval. Writing in lifelong confinement in the Ottoman prison colony of Acre towards the end of the 19th century, Baha'u'llah noted that winds of despair are blowing in every direction. The strife that divides and afflicts the human race is increasing. The signs of impending convulsions can be discerned. 100 years later, his followers, members of the now rapidly growing Baha'i world community, recognize this non-linear evolutionary trend and are committed to acting in accordance with it. So it's becoming clear that the relationship between science and religion can be understood simply as complementary knowledge systems within the same whole, within one reality. Both science and religion are progressive in nature. One advances through investigation and discovery, and the other through divine revelation. And because everything is connected to everything else, the two together lead to a grand synthesis of the parts of the whole. This understanding of the hidden wholeness of the entire creation is a big part of what has led to the softening of the boundaries between religions as well. The world has become smaller. The one creator is seen as having one purpose, and spiritual forces are moving us toward a grand synthesis of our evolutionary process, toward the realization of our oneness. So we've, in about a century, from the end of the middle or the end of the 19th century to now, we've moved from the interfaith age to the interspiritual age. And as we know, so much has happened since the mid-19th century, from the manifold increase in the speed of travel and communication to the exponential explosion of knowledge to all the human rights movements. And just in the realm of religion, the translation of the world's scriptures began opening the way for a new field of study, the study of comparative religion, led by Freeman Clarke's 1871 classic, 10 Great Religions. While American transcendentalists may have been the first to build a bridge between Western and Eastern religions, it was the first parliament of the world's religions in 1893 in Chicago, though dominated by American Protestants, that provided the first platform for the direct exchange of thoughts, beliefs, and worldviews between faith communities as widespread as Islam, African American traditions, Buddhism, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Jainism, Hinduism, Judaism, and the Baha'i faith, thus ushering in the global interfaith movement. And then in 1999, Brother Wayne Teasdale, in his book, The Mystic Heart, announced that we are at the dawn of the inner spiritual age. And this is clearly a step beyond the interfaith age, because the inner spiritual age acknowledges a spiritual interdependence among the world's religions. Brother Wayne Teasdale sees that an actual impact of traditions on each other is clearly discernible in history. He notes in describing this that Hinduism has directly influenced the rise of Buddhism. Jainism and its teaching of ahimsa, or non-harming, has influenced both Buddhism and Hinduism, and that Christianity would hardly be possible without Judaism, and Islam is inconceivable without these predecessors. So the boundaries between the world's religions are softening. And this is creating a great shift in consciousness. And as Brother Wayne describes in defining the inner spiritual age, it's a recognition of the interdependence of all domains of life and reality, and that these also are reflected in the primary spiritual principle of the Baha'i teachings. While most of the world's religions are currently adopting a more holistic sense of shared values, the Baha'i faith came into existence in 1844 with a fully developed understanding of the oneness of humanity. So the effects of the renewal of religion are being seen and felt everywhere. A global, interfaith, interspiritual, indigenous, and interdisciplinary effort is currently bringing people together from all directions into the cause of oneness. Massive and rapid change everywhere demands our participation and action on behalf of this unfolding process. So what is the global movement of our time? We might think of it as the process of building a culture of oneness. We live at the conjunction of transformation and integration, where world unity is a realizable goal as we build the foundation of a new civilization. And others from many other traditions are picking up this and really are a part of this global movement as well. As this quote from Desmond Tutu shows, God holds out an invitation to us, to wholeness that leads to flourishing for all of us. Our planet will not survive if we cling to the verities of the past. We must recognize that we are part of one family, the human family. So in the past century and 3/4, we've seen the birth of the global interfaith movement with the first Parliament of the World's Religions in 1893, the inauguration of the Inner Spiritual Age in 1999, and now a global effort to build a culture of oneness is coming into sharper focus. There have been many threads that have moved this progress along. Some of those main threads of this global bridge building movement are efforts in organizations such as the Vedanta Society from 1894, the World Congress of Faiths in 1936, Temple of Understanding, 1960, the Institute for Noetic Sciences, 1973, the United Religions Initiative, 1993, the Interfaith Youth Corps, 2002, the Charter for Compassion, 2009, the Shift Network, 2010, and the Inner Spiritual Network, 2013, among many others. So to move from a consciousness of duality to a consciousness of oneness requires a deeper understanding of non-duality, a recognition of reality as one and indivisible. Adopting a consciousness of oneness is what will lead to a culture of oneness. A culture of oneness, it's important to understand what that means, how I'm using it. It means living in unity within our multiplicity. It means honoring our diversity and safeguarding our differences. And I think one example of this, of the organic nature of building a culture of oneness can be seen with the recent Women's March in January that took place simultaneously in nearly 40 countries on the same day. The voice of solidarity and oneness arose that day as all the human rights causes converged into one cause, one movement. So as this global movement goes on, as we build a culture of oneness, our greatest danger is remaining complacent in a duality-focused world. Our challenge is to disregard the fleeting notions of the day and tap into the spiritual forces of our time. The most important work today, the action most needed to be taken by each of us, is work across boundaries, across differences. Any step that can be taken in our regular, everyday interactions toward anyone different in any way than us is to remove barriers that have been put up between us by others. Joining hands across differences is the sacred activism of our time. Anything that gets in the way of natural, compassionate, unconditional, loving relationships and interactions is artificial. All the superficial, illusory boundaries, borders, and differences between us need to be consciously broken down, dismantled, and crossed so we can experience no separation between any of us as human beings. This is the one form of social and sacred activism that will go the farthest in healing the great divide between the human family and helping to move us toward and live according to a consciousness of oneness. And that will help bridge the gap between separation and wholeness. And as greater numbers embrace global citizenship, and as this is reflected in all social spheres, a consciousness of oneness will become as commonly accepted in the near future as nationalism was in the past. So there's a lot there, and I'd like to kind of close with a meditation that will help, I think, integrate much of what I was trying to point out here in the last hour or so. Meditation is an important tool and for all human beings. And we know that right mindfulness, which is part of the Eightfold Path, is used, when it is used as a regular practice, can be a way to change the mind's habits, transform consciousness, repattern our thinking, and create new ways of seeing the world, speaking about it, and acting in it. If we think, speak, and act with a consciousness of oneness and establish this as a habit, we will create a pattern that allows us to live in oneness. So I'm going to start this meditation and just kind of relax wherever you are and kind of take this in. Close your eyes if you can, or if you want to, and just listen. This is about a 6-7 minute meditation.
Turn it up if you wouldn't mind, Rob.
Okay.
Find a quiet place where you can relax and let go completely. When you are ready, close your eyes and just breathe naturally, not trying to control the breath, but aware of the in-breath and the out-breath. Allow each breath to bring you deeper into relaxation. Feel this relaxation in your shoulders, back, arms, legs, and every muscle, fiber, and cell in your body. Now imagine that you are starting out on a journey from separation to union. Your soul, that eternal part of yourself, is traveling with your body, the temporal part of yourself. Your soul, with the power of the Spirit, knows the oneness of all things, the oneness that pervades all of creation. As you feel the relaxation of your entire body, become aware of your heart and feel the love always emanating from your heart. This love always in your heart is the love that connects you as a living, breathing co-creator to all other created beings and unifies the entire creation with this universal, altruistic, unconditional love. There is no room in your heart for anything else. Imagine this deep, eternal love spreading out from your heart to all things around you and to all things far from you. Feel in your depths the power of this love spreading from you throughout the neighborhood, the country, the world, and the universe, to all forms of life, the animals, the plants, the stars. Then let this love flow back into your heart and feel the true joy, true ecstasy that it brings you. Take a moment to feel this joy. In this feeling of unconditional love, allow yourself to come into certitude, where you recognize providence in all things and the inner significance of all things. See creation in its perfect form as a unified whole and as sanctified in all its parts. Understand justice as an eternal law, grace as ever-present, and divine wisdom as an eternal wellspring, continuous and never-ending. Passing beyond the last plane of limitation, you come to know there is no separation between you and the whole, and no distinction to be made between any of its parts. The entire creation is one, as reality is one. Take a moment to feel this oneness. To live with and within this consciousness of oneness is to remember at all times, especially when most difficult, that we are all interconnected, all one. What would it be like for you to put this consciousness of oneness into action in every way and in every aspect of your life? Feel your heart filled with divine love. It sees only oneness. From this space of oneness, differences are accepted for what they are. You experience the spiritual qualities of humility, respect for all creatures, and a more intense desire to experience unity in diversity. Take as much time now as you need to reflect on how you can see yourself maintaining this over the remaining years of your life. And when your reflections come to a close, open your eyes, come back into the present, and write down all the new thoughts you've had during this meditation to keep with you and to refer to as often as needed.
Okay, I think if we have time left for some discussion, questions, that would be great.
I believe we have some time left. Yes. Thank you, Bob. Fascinating presentation and a very calming and quieting end. And it's a good series, and I appreciate your time to put this series together for us. While I'm looking for questions here, I did want to ask you a question, and that's that you, I think, have traced very well the spiritual forces of integration, which are so strong in the world. But I was wondering if you wanted to make any kind of comment about the complementary side, the spiritual forces of disintegration, fundamentalism, for example, and the House of Justice particularly singles out religious fanaticism as a major issue of the world today, which it seems to me is related, actually, but I thought I'd see what you wanted to suggest about that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Rob. It's definitely connected, and because they're both parts of one whole. And I guess I didn't really spend much time on the disintegration side of the process, because the focus of the book and the presentation really was on what is leading us toward oneness.
Right.
But obviously there is the other side of disintegration, and the couple of examples that you just mentioned are there, and you know, and so almost in every realm of life, whether it's religion or culture or nationalism and politics, there's that other side of disintegration going on in all of those realms of society too. And I just didn't, I mean, it could have been a 2 or 3 volume book if I had wanted to go into all of those. But but what's interesting about the 2 aspects of that process is first of all, whether or not, and then how they are either balancing each other out, or whether we feel like or perceive one aspect of that dual process, twofold process, outweighing the other side, and also is that a phenomenon that kind of goes back and forth. At one point, one side may appear to outweigh the other side, and then it reverses back, and to maintain that balance. You know, there's so many really huge questions around that process of integration and disintegration.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Perjea asks whether it's possible to get the slide how the consciousness continuum can lead to opposite outcomes. And I suppose the answer to that is we'll be putting these things up on our the web page for the talk. And
yeah, I was wondering about that too, because the slide with that on it, the chart came out really smaller than I wanted it to. And if there is any way for me to send that chart separately somehow, somewhere, I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, that would be good. You could send it, for example, as a PDF or as a JPEG.
Yeah.
And we could add it to the web page about the series. That'd be easy to do.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send it to you separately.
Good. Good. That's our one question so far that we have. And I wanted to ask you also about the interspiritual movement, because certainly the interfaith movement is alive and strong. I'm at the American Academy of Religion annual meeting right now in Boston, and they just launched the Association of Interfaith and Interreligious Studies, I think it's called, the AIIS. And the effort at seminaries in particular to strengthen interfaith has really been growing very quickly. I haven't seen as much about interspiritual efforts, and I was wondering if you're aware of things other than a book or two which has been bringing about the development of that particular movement.
Yeah, that's a great question. And from my understanding of it, it is a much smaller kind of grassroots level effort. And it is pretty much being defined by a few individual books. And there are a number of people who now kind of consider themselves or even label themselves as interspiritual, but there's no organizing group or that has brought. I mean, like on the interfaith side, there is the Parliament of the World's Religions and United Religions Initiative. Those are the two main ones that keep the interfaith movement organized and going. But so far, the interspiritual network itself is quite small and doesn't have anywhere near the capacity and resources that those other two interfaith groups do.
Shahla asks, well, she makes a comment about the whole question of whether religions influence each other or whether they're all getting their truth from the same divine source. And I suppose the answer is there's both of them going on. She also notes that the oneness of religion is still being denied by the greatest majority of humanity. And then she asks this question: how do we view the widespread dishonesty, deception, and general lack of ethics all around us?
Yeah, another great big question. I mean, we are seeing much more of that all around us today, especially it seems like in the political realm. But I mean, one way that we've always seen that, I think, is just as a reluctance to take on the latest spiritual principles, and a resistance to that, and at the same time a stronger, greater effort to hold on to the old. So it kind of goes back to the twofold process we were talking about of disintegration and integration, and those two forces are continuing to battle it out, and the stronger one gets, then that leads to the other one getting stronger, or at least trying to. So it's a back and forth process, but overall we can see that the holding on to, not the holding, but the even the wider acceptance of untruths and unethical conduct and all of those kinds of things. We can see that as part of the process of just, I mean, there's a number of ways of putting it, but just living in the past and being reluctant and totally resistant to move forward into the future.
Yeah, Betty Fisher notes that Shoghi Effendi has a lot to say about the absence of a unifying principle in The Unfoldment of World Religion, which I assume is in one of the World Order letters. There's commentary about exactly this subject there.
Thanks, great resource for that.
I don't see any other questions right offhand. We can see if anybody else offers one here for a second. Otherwise, we can move on and look at the upcoming web talks and courses, and I can mention them real quick and then thank people. Why don't we go back to my slide and then we'll see if there's anything else that comes in briefly here. And again, I want to thank you, Bob, for all you've done with this series, which really has been quite useful, and I'm sure many people will enjoy them on the web in the future. We have quite a few upcoming web talks in December and in January. You'll notice, for example, that we have two by Reba Caruth on December 10th and on January 21st on the spiritual destiny of America and the West. She has a total of 3 talks, and she'll be giving a third one in February about that. December 3rd, two weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now, 2 or 3 weeks from now, Elena Mostakova Postart will be talking about a psychology that responds to our times, transforming inner oppression into awakened, aligned, and liberated spirit. And then on January 14th in the next year, Joanne Borovica, who's just published a marvelous book about the Baha'i approach to understanding the Bible, will be giving a talk on the 10 plagues of Exodus in the light of the Baha'i writings. So we've got some really marvelous talks coming up in those 2 months, and February and March are pretty good too, and April actually. I'm very excited about what we've lined up so far. In terms of upcoming courses, Equality of Men and Women has just started, but we still will accept registrations for it, so it's worth mentioning that. Linking Spiritual and Physical Intimacy in Marriage starts on the 28th, as does Responding Effectively to Global Challenges, 3 World Order of Baha'u'llah letters. And that, of course, is a course specifically about those 3 letters by Shoghi Effendi. You can also follow us on at wilmetinstitute.org, where you can get more information about the Wilmet Institute and its upcoming courses. We're always happy to see what people are interested in, and if they have any other suggestions for us offering courses, we're always interested in that. And in fact, Betty finally did reply. World Order of Baha'u'llah, the final World Order letter, is where the reference to the absence of unifying principle is found in the World Order of Baha'u'llah letters. And she also refers to this course, the World Order of Baha'u'llah letters coming up, of which she's one of the faculty. You can follow us, of course, on wilmetinstitute.org, as I said, and go to youtube.com to see all of the different videos that we have, over 40 now, I believe, and more, of course, every month. You can also call us at our 800 number. So that pretty much wraps us up for today. We want to thank everyone again for tuning in and watching us, and we look forward to seeing you next month with our web talks at that point. Thank you very much today for participating.